When is the right time for DJs to finally hang up their headphones? That's the first question that we're dealing with today from our wonderful community who've provided, as ever, all the questions that we'll be answering here on the Digital DJ Tips podcast, the podcast that helps DJs, aspiring DJs, and just the curious become better at understanding and doing this thing that we call DJing. As ever, this is brought to you by the students of the Digital DJ Tips DJ School, which means there's no adverts and everything here is done for the good of the community and not for some overriding sponsor. So thank you, community, for making this possible as ever. Let's get stuck into this week's questions. So this first question is from Michael, one of our long-time students, who says, when did you know it was time to stop taking gigs? When was it time to hang your headphones up? This is what Michael wrote. I've been with you since 11 years ago, and I found Digital DJ Tips, turned my hobby into a legitimate business using you as my personal mentor, and we have loved being on your journey with you, Michael. Michael says, I'd literally never have gotten the success I've had without you and DJ tutor Steve as well. But the older my little ones get, they're now 5 and 8, the more I'm counting down the days till I hang up the headphones and just stick with the day job. I'm making a substantial side hustle money that would rival a lot of full-time jobs, which affords the kids pleasantries that I never got to experience as a child. But that's the conundrum for me, income versus time. I mostly still love it, even though patience for the little annoyances can get a bit short. But that can't be the only thing I'm weighing. So what I want to know from those of you who've moved on, when did you know? Wow, what a question to start with, eh? To appreciate what you're up to, you've got to know about the end game in order to value where you are right now and all that kind of philosophical stuff. It's a great question. It reminds me of a quote from Desmond Llewellyn, who is the actor, if any of you are fans of James Bond, who played Q in the James Bond films. And he said, actors never retire, they just get less and less work, which is another way of looking at it. So let's talk about this. Well, to start with, in the community, you guys and girls have been chipping in with your views. From Michael and Bill said, when it starts to feel more like a job and more like it's just consuming your time, at that point, personally, I'd rather just start doing something else. I mean, look, having anything in your life that earns you money that you enjoy is an absolute gift. You know, I would guess that most people don't particularly enjoy their jobs, right? So the fact that maybe it hasn't got the shine that was there right at the very beginning doesn't mean it's still not something that, as you say, Michael, you more or less still enjoy. But you put a little bit of emphasis on income versus time, Michael, and I just want to kind of gently point out that that's pretty universal. There's not many people who are lucky enough to not need to earn money, or at least to not enjoy the money they earn, but realizing that it's taking time away from them, and getting that balance between your time and your money, especially as you get older, is difficult. You know, at the end of the day, it's why people retire, right? So look, this is universal. This is much bigger than DJing. So what a great question. And I asked around, and I also looked at some of our tutors as well. And I thought a good place to start this question would be with me. So I was a DJ from the age of 14. I got some old-fashioned record decks, as in like literally a plywood box covered in carpet, glued on, with some old-fashioned turntables that didn't have speed controls, and a cassette deck as well, because it was a posh one, and a little mixer, and some flashing lights behind some frosted glass in another box. And we kind of bought this in the classifieds, my friend and I, when we were still at school, and we started mobile DJing. And then that led into, and this was already as someone who loved music, right? And this led into the club scene and putting on my own events. And I had a career that most of the time I felt like literally if a film crew had been following me around, they'd have some pretty good footage. I just loved my life. I thought it was fantastic. All the way through my 20s, DJed in Ibiza, DJed in U2's nightclub, booked all my heroes, got to call a lot of them personal friends. It was just an amazing, blessed time. But when I hit 35, 36, I remember suddenly realizing it had gone off the boil for me. And two things really made that obvious. The first thing was I had this kind of like quite horrible realization that the dance floor was literally half my age. I was literally playing to people who were half my age. And that was a real wow, because until that point, I felt I'd been learning about music, about the brilliance of a communal dance floor and where it could take us, and contributing to a culture that was growing. And I just felt like this was my life's calling. But then I realized that the people I felt I was going on this journey with were no longer on my dance floors. It was a new generation of people. And I realized actually that without me realizing it, it had happened a couple of times. And at that point, I thought, I'm kind of going in circles here. And it was I didn't want to let go of it. It reminded me of the time as a child when I suddenly realized I wasn't really into cartoons anymore. And I preferred stuff with real people in it. And I thought, oh, but I've really loved cartoons. I want the magic back. I don't want to let go of cartoons. I remember it clearly as like an 11-year-old. And I kind of felt the same. But I knew I had to walk away from it. Now, it took a few years because I was making good money and so on. But I did. I walked away with my wife, my girlfriend at the time, who I'd met in the nightclub that I'd promoted and that had won awards and that bought my house for me and all that. I didn't even have a day job. There was nothing. And I just walked away. I had to actually left the country because I knew it would be too easy to carry it on. And taking that space away from it all was what led me to realizing a couple of really important things, which is number one, you're always a DJ. It never leaves you. Just like a professional footballer or sports person or whatever, just because you get too old for it, it doesn't mean that it leaves you. It's something that is literally written through you like a stick of rock. So I realized that. And I realized I missed it. But what I also realized is I didn't want to go back to what I'd been doing before. So for me, it turned into two things. It turned into Sunday afternoon sunset DJ sets, playing in a wonderful, lovely beach bar where we could watch the sun go down. I was literally 20 yards from the waves, lapping on the beach, beautiful vibes, and DJing from about 4 p.m. to about 8 p.m. when the sun had gone down, basically. I'd DJ through the sunset. And I did that for so many years. It was so wonderful. It kept me involved in DJing, but I was no longer a full-time professional. But the second, and of course the most exciting thing that happened, is that I realized that I really did want to share what I'd learned. And in 2010, started Digital DJ Tips, about 4 or 5 years after I'd stopped DJing full-time. And of course, now 15 years on, it's our 15th anniversary this year, that was the right move for me. Is it the right move for the rest of my life? Who knows? But hey, it's still working now. So look, I would say stay DJing, Michael, but just try doing it for fun. Or maybe from home, maybe do live streaming or start a podcast series. Maybe start teaching mobile DJs. Another thing you could consider is starting a mobile DJ business where you're not doing the DJing, where you're just employing other people to do it for you, right? So you're still making the money, but you're not going out there and committing quite so much time. But then again, I looked around our other DJs and we've got people like Jazzy Jeff, who he still has a passion. Now, Jeff is getting older. Jeff feels it more. He feels the strain of being on the road more. So this brings me on to something else. You can charge more. You can just treble your prices. You can specialize more. Look back at your last 100 gigs and say, which ones did I really enjoy? Go for those. Change your website so that the only testimonials on there are the ones from the people who book you for those gigs. It could be that they're a certain type of person, they're in a certain kind of venue, the music was a certain type, but whatever it is, hone in, specialize, because people who specialize get paid more by fewer customers. The customers who want what you do will have to book you because you've specialized, you're the person who does it best. And you'll be playing fewer gigs, you'll be charging more for them, and maybe you'll make more, maybe you'll make less over time. That doesn't sound to me like that's a big consideration for you, but you'll be having fun and you'll be basically getting choosier with what you do. So I think that's going to help you as well, Michael. But just remember, you never fully retire as a DJ. You just don't. I'll give you a great example. I have no time for DJing. What with making all our courses and hanging out with the other DJs we work with and keeping them happy and doing all the stuff we do here at Digital DJ Tips, I have no time for DJing. DJing is something you need to put time into. It's like a muscle you flex, right? You can't just step in and out of it. But that said, I miss it. I still miss it. And as I said earlier, the gigs just get fewer and fewer. And actually, I have over the last year built a mobile DJ setup that runs on batteries and that plays with little turntables, little like portable turntables, you know, the old Columbia ones with the handle, and it all fits into this little case, and I've got all the stuff I need, and I've been collecting 7 inches. Our local radio station actually had a fire sale because they'd gone totally digital, you know, ages ago. But they had this room full of all their old music, and I bought all these bags of old 7 inches, and I've gone through them all and catalogued them, and I'm actually playing a gig tomorrow night. And if it goes well, I'll be playing a couple of festivals this summer with my 7 inch setup and a camera so everyone can see what I'm doing, right? So it never leaves you. But clearly what I'm doing, and I guess what you'll end up doing, Michael, is very different to what's got you this far. And that's fine. It's a bit sad if we're not developing, I would say. So cool. It's a really, really good question. And it's not one that's nice to handle. So thank you very much for asking that one and being bold enough to ask that one. So Jack says, I started DJing in clubs when I was 20. This Saturday, I'm playing for my own 60th birthday party. Jack, that's fantastic. You're definitely in the Jazzy Jeff camp there. Kesha says, I started DJing at the ripe old age of 48, but I love it more and more, except now I need to get back into it after I finish my science class. You're young at heart, Kesha. You're studying, you're DJing, you're doing everything someone 30 years younger than you would be doing. So thank you for that. Evergreen there, definitely. Benny says, I started in the 80s, I stopped in the 90s, and I just started back up again 3 years ago at the age of 53. And you're not alone there, Benny. So many people get real, you know, families, jobs, marriage, homes. I need the spare room for the kids, not for your decks. So many people do that, and everything goes up in the attic or whatever. And then, you know, a bit later on, they come back to it. It never leaves you. Just trust me on that one. And Paul says, I started again at the age of 50 after a 25-year break. Andrew says, I'm 54 and I've been a DJ for 27 years. I aim on being a DJ until I'm unable to be one. There's enjoyment in seeing others around you enjoying what you do. It's an addiction almost. Oh yeah, it's certainly an addiction. I totally agree with you there. Wow, what a start, and philosophical and all that stuff as well. I think we need to move on to something which is geeky. Yeah, should we move on to a geeky question? The next one is from John. John says, hi Phil. Why did Pioneer DJ and other hardware companies stop producing separate or modular models? I'm referring to models like the CDJ800 and the CDJ450. These are basically cut down versions of a deck or a mixer. Right? The one thing that you plug into another thing and another thing and maybe another thing, and you end up with a full DJ setup. They only have the very expensive club gear now, says John, which is basically one model, the CDJ3000. I know they have controllers that stand alone and have everything in it, but I much prefer to build my setup slowly rather than spend all that money for one big all-in-one unit. In addition, I would love the flexibility to use, for instance, whatever mixer I choose, or to swap to another player if I choose to do that as well. Many DJs I know feel the same way. It's a good question. You know, I've been, as I mentioned earlier, doing this for about 15 years now. At the very beginning of my journey doing this, I actually got back into it and I got into teaching because I bought one of the very first DJ controllers. And I'm like, how does this thing work? This is new, because when I'd been DJing, it was all vinyl and then CDs. And so I realized that there was no help. I was online looking on whatever the search engine was back then. Hey Jeeves or Google or early Google. Remember the old Google logo? But whatever it wasn't very good. Alta Vista, you remember that one? Anyway, I was doing the web searches of 2010 and there was nothing there. So I thought, you know what, we'll start figuring this out and writing it up, and the rest is history. Back then, the kind of DJing that we now all know as hobby DJs, which is basically get a laptop, plug a box into it, and DJ with all the stuff you could possibly want at a fraction of the cost of buying professional gear, right? That's where it all came from. That kind of DJing was very, 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 very different to what the pros were doing. It cost a tenth of the amount. You didn't really have professional gear that could do it. You were buying little cool boxes that had all the features, but certainly didn't look professional and frankly didn't act professional a lot of the time. What happened was that the boundaries between the two blurred. And so it's a bit like the digital camera world, right? If you go back to the beginning of digital cameras, you could get digital cameras across the whole price range. But then guess what happened? The iPhone, which is basically a computer, came along. The iPhone is the equivalent of a laptop and a controller in the DJ world. It slashed the cost of taking pictures and it obliterated the bottom end of the market. And the only way you could compete, or the only stuff that existed after that, was the very, very expensive stuff where people weren't interested in using like the laptop and the controller or the iPhone for pictures or whatever. So what happened was that the bottom end of the market got blown away by laptops and controllers. It was far cheaper, they did more. But what's happened in the meantime is that the gear that was left, if you like, the really expensive gear that DJs still use in DJ booths nowadays, got better and better and better, to the point where it could do most of the stuff that you could do on the laptop. And also a new breed of gear came along that could do it all, that you could use with or without your laptop, that you could plug USBs into, that you could connect to the internet and stream from. But the thing is, all of this new gear it grew out of the idea of having one unit to do it all. And what the manufacturers found is that's where the market was going. Those smaller devices, just like, you walk down any high street nowadays and try and find yourself a digital camera, like the old-fashioned digital cameras, you can't. You're getting up to DSLRs and stuff before anyone will sell you anything. They don't exist. So it didn't sell. It was not economically viable for them to carry on these models because no one wanted them. And nowadays, modular only makes sense in pro environments. The all-in-one boxes, they can just do it all for far less money. Now, all that said, you never completely kill a scene. You never completely kill a culture. And the boutique thing is definitely a scene. The analog thing is definitely a scene. There's a show for producers, really mainly, called Super Booth that's coming up soon. But it's the same deal. It's boutique, small companies making gear that appeals to people who are pushing back against this, who want to mix and match and build stuff up. Now, modular DJing's never really gone away. But the idea of being able to buy cut down versions of pro DJ gear that still look like the pro DJ gear kind of has gone away. So you can still buy some pretty interesting little units, like the updates that was released today for the Roland SP404 Mark II for Serato is a modular piece of gear that is very different. And you can plug extra stuff into that kind of setup to give yourself decks and that kind of thing. But it's very different to the way it used to be. And I just think that it's become a specialist part of the market, if you like. It's there if you look for it, but you're going to be trying a bit harder to find it. And the mainstream players just aren't interested. Things move on, John. It's just how it is, isn't it? You snooze, you lose and all that. So, yeah, I think really you're just going to be maybe buying secondhand, maybe looking at some of these smaller brands that still make that kind of gear and thinking outside the box a bit if modular is still the way you want to go. You're not alone, John. Don't feel like you're completely alone, because you're not. So this next question is about, well, growing pains with digital music. So it leads on quite nicely. A segue. A nice blend there. It's from Cabes. Hello, Cabes, and thank you for this question. Students, thank you so much, by the way, for all your questions. There's actually too many for me to respond to live today, which is great, but I will try my hardest to get through them because I do want to give as many of you an answer as I can. Cabes says, hey Phil, one of the biggest challenges I have as a DJ is workflow. I've collected tons of great music, but I spend so much time making sure the metadata, this is the data about the music, is accurate, like assigning the correct genres, the years and the energy levels, that it all ends up delaying the actual DJing. It's a very manually heavy process. Do you have any advice for balancing curation with creativity? That's an amazing phrase, balancing curation with creativity. I might steal that one, Cabes. How do I streamline this without losing the precision I care about? Thank you. It's a great question because we can, unfortunately, it's one of the curses of laptop DJing. We've got all our stuff there. We've got all our music there. We can, in 2 clicks, change something about those files. We can change the way we, you know, we list the artists or the way we write the years or the genres we've got attached to them and all that kind of stuff. You're not alone, Caves. Already in the student audience, people are saying, yep, Michael says it sounds just like me. Yep, and you're not the only one. So look, this is normal, right? This is a symptom of digital DJing. So let's get some reality in here, Caves. The first thing is, I want you to think about what vinyl DJs would do. What would a vinyl DJ do? Now, vinyl DJs were very careful with their collections, right? Careful what they bought, careful how they catalogued them, careful how they ordered them, and careful about how they made sure that each record was labelled up properly. For instance, we used to put the BPM on a sticker on the front of the track and sometimes the key as well. But there was only so much you could do. And yet some of the biggest DJs in the world played some of the biggest venues in the world to some of the biggest crowds in the world and gave people some of the best times they'd ever had with the most rudimentary and basic organisation of their music, right? What can you learn from that kind of workflow? If you had to go back to doing it that way, what would you do? And what is nice to have, or maybe whisper it, even irrelevant? So I'm encouraging you to simplify what you choose to do with your music. A simple workflow that you can stick to for life is better than a overly complex one that breaks down when you get disillusioned or you haven't got enough time, or you throw a load of new music into your laptop and rush off to a gig. And, you know, all of these kinds of things that actually reality comes to bite, and your hard developed systems where you're running your music through this and that, and then this, and then you're putting it there, and then you're doing this, you know, they fall down. It's better to do simple stuff for a lifetime than complex stuff that goes wrong after a few months, where you hit a kind of place where you're balancing curation and creativity too much in the other direction. So think about what you're doing and whether it's really necessary. To me, if I have an artist, a title, a year and a genre on my tracks, that'll do, right? That's not too much. That's not too much to ask, right? Anything else, I'll do on the go. Cue points and checking the beat grids and stuff. I'll do it on the go. Now your balance might be different, but streamline it. I'm going to guess your balance is a little bit more involved than mine, shall we say. A couple of practical tips. Never work on your collection without listening to your collection. I learned this one a long time ago. If you find yourself with your nose in the computer, with your tracks all in a library view, and you're doing this and you're doing that, and it's gone quiet for the last 10, 20, 30 minutes, stop it. Get some music on. This is about the music. So never work on your collection without listening to your collection. Simplify. Ask what a vinyl DJ would do. And don't chase perfection, right? Jazzy Jeff, God bless him, his music collection is, he keeps trying to get it perfect. But frankly, it's a little bit of a mess. Now, if the best, most respected DJ literally in the world doesn't have everything perfect, you ain't going to gain anything by being more perfect than he is. He's got instinct, he's got skill that he's honed over 40 years, he's got a lot in his head, and his music is organised enough on his computer so he knows what he's doing. Be that kind of DJ. And a couple of little games you can play. I think introducing random elements to your practice can help you break out of this, oh, I've got to spend all the time in the world curating my collection, or I won't be able to DJ. I once read a book on photography which said you need a daily practice. You need a daily practice in anything creative, right? So that's something else. But you need a daily practice. So go out and take some pictures and keep one a day and write why you've kept it in a photography journal or something. And I like that. But the guy who wrote the book said one game you can play is take your camera, which could be an iPhone nowadays, and just take random pictures. Don't look what you're pointing at. Just take random pictures. Just keep pressing that shutter button, moving your wrist around. And just go out for an hour and take loads of random pictures. Get home, spend another hour looking through them and pick out the good ones. And he said you might be surprised. There might be some really good stuff there. And that'll teach you that a lot of the creativity is accidental, right? It's the same with DJing. A lot of creativity is accidental. So you can do the same thing. So introducing random elements, like play a game with blind selections. Use one of those random number generators online. If you search random number app on your phone, there'll be an app, and put your numbers in, like from 1 to 500, however big your collection is. Get all your collection in one view and press random number. Pull a track out, start it playing. Press it again, pull another track out. Find a way of blending them, find a way of mixing them. Keep doing it, right? You'll learn a lot. Nothing to do with curation. Now try going to another DJ's house and each of you take a turn picking a track from the other one's collection or playing a set from the other one's collection. You'll rediscover stuff that you had forgotten about. Even using artificial intelligence to offer routes through your music. Export your music as a CSV file, which just means a text file. Most DJ software let you do that. Drop it into an AI and say, give me a DJ set that concentrates on insert idea here. Take those songs and play them. Anything that will trigger your creativity through something random rather than, the imposition of having to be there doing all this stuff with your metadata because you somehow think if you do it, it'll make you better. And the final tip, Cabes, the final tip, it's the one I give all, like IT professionals will say, whatever the problem is, the answer is reboot. I think with DJing, whatever the problem is, the answer is book yourself a gig. Because if you know you're DJing in 2 weeks, 10 days, 1 week, 4 days, 2 days, tonight, a lot of the things that you worry about will suddenly seem they're not quite so important because you've got the very healthy fear of making a fool of yourself in public because you ain't got ready, right? So you'll suddenly know what you're meant to be doing because it'll be getting ready for that gig, and it's a very healthy thing. So get something in the diary, get something in your calendar, and try not to worry about the tiny, tiny bits. You're probably doing so much right already, Cabes, that you get 80% of the benefit from 20% of the work, and you get probably 95% of the benefit from 80% of the work. So don't worry about the final 20%. You're doing all right. You're doing good enough as it is. In the wonderful student community who are here live with us today, Milton says creativity is definitely accidental. Just playing records brings a bunch of ideas up. Paul says you can just ask Siri to give you a random number. Of course you can. Times are moving on, aren't they? And Benny says, I just looked at my email and I've received 19 emails of music from a record label I'm on as an artist or DJ or producer. I will definitely be using this method. Oh yeah, subscribing to record labels online and saying, send me your stuff. And a lot of them will. Drop them all in a folder and play with them. Benny says exactly that. I love picking random tunes and just seeing what happens. We've got such a great selection of questions from our audience today, and they're so different. We've gone from giving up DJing to equipment to creativity and handling digital music. Let's move on to a question about mixing. So these are actually doing quite nicely in moving around the areas that we teach. If you're new to digital DJ tips, the way we teach DJing in our book called Rock the Dance Floor. If you don't know it, it's called Rock the Dance Floor. Go take a look on Amazon, currently in the 2nd edition. But the way we teach DJing is to talk about 5 areas of DJing. You've got the gear, which is the geeky stuff. That includes the software. You've got the music, which is the literally tools of the trade, right? You've got mixing, which is what you do with the music on the gear. You've got performing, which is all the ways that you take the gear, the music and the mixing and do something for other people. And you've got success, which is what you do next, whether that's gigs, whether that's producing and becoming a superstar DJ, whether that's live streaming, playing parties for your friends, making mixtapes, or just damn well doing it for yourself. However you define success, that's where all the other 4 steps take you to. And that's the way we teach as well in our courses and so on. And we like to have a mix of questions across all of these things. Well, we've kind of done quite well. Michael's question I would put under success, choosing where to go with what you've learned. John's question about the hardware is definitely gear. Cabe's question, arguably music. Sarah's question, which is I'm coming on to now, is definitely about mixing. So this is what Sarah said. Hi Phil, I've been going back through a few of my digital DJ tips courses lately to see if I've missed anything the first time round, and a question popped into my head. It's always important for DJs to read the room and to be ready to play the right song at the right time, and also to know when to mix quickly to keep the energy up. You're quite right, Sarah. Or conversely, where to leave a song playing a little bit longer. But at the same time, many of the transitions you teach us in your courses must have taken a lot of thought and planning to create, and sometimes need a lot of practice to get right. So obviously they can't be done on the fly. Also true, Sarah. Sarah says, I'd love to hear how an experienced DJ would deal with this balance when playing out. Is it a case of having a few elaborate transitions pre-planned and using a very simple transition to get in and out of other tracks that you're playing on the spur of the moment? Sometimes the quick and easy transitions sound clunky to me compared with a planned mix, and I'm trying to get past this barrier in my head. It's a brilliant, brilliant question, Sarah. You know, we see DJs who perform completely pre-planned routines. They're often short, they often enter competitions, they win things, they're scratch DJs, they're battle DJs. We also see DJs who just turn up and play, and they play all night, right? And everything in between. So the guys who turn up and play all night, or the girls who play all night, often technically they don't do an awful lot. The people who've got a 20-minute routine, everything they do is technical. It's like a huge guitar solo versus someone just strumming away the chords in the backing band in a venue or whatever. But there is a middle ground, and you've kind of touched on it, Sarah. It's okay to practice routines and then to move into a part of your set where you're going to do something you've done before. What DJs who play every night tend to do is the same transitions over and over again as part of their sets, but the bits in between change. Now, it's okay to use simple mixing techniques when you are not doing complicated mixing techniques. You say they sound clunky to you compared to planned mixes, Sarah, but have you actually recorded your sets? Have you listened back? Because two things. One, there's nothing clunkier necessarily about a simple transition compared to a complicated one. Indeed, if you mess up a complicated one, it sounds an awful lot clunkier than a simple one, right? But secondly, when we are DJing, we do not hear our DJing in the way everyone else does. In other words, you never know what the thing you just did sounds like to the rest of the world while you're doing it. The only way you can hear what you actually sound like is by recording yourself and listening back to that. So Sarah, record yourself and listen back. You might be pretty surprised at how balanced and polished you sound even when you're doing the simple stuff. Most DJs, back to the 80-20 rule, most DJs will do simple transitions 80% of the time and maybe something a bit more complicated the other 20% of the time. Now, when it comes to our training, of course, if we've got a transition we want to teach you, the reason we want to teach it to you is because it sounds good, but it shows off a skill or a technique or something you can do. It takes something which is normal and pushes it to an extreme, right? So if we're trying to demonstrate an echo, we might pick a transition and work on it so it really shows off the echo to the best of its ability. And it takes a bit of dexterity to perform it, but it sounds amazing, right? But that doesn't mean that learning those skills and learning and copying, because we encourage you to copying the way we do it with difficult, hard to learn, got to practice it a few times, transitions, isn't helping your day-to-day DJing. Far from it. It's trickling down. It's rubbing off. It's improving overall. It's making your day-to-day stuff even easier because you can now do complicated stuff that you never thought you could do. I'm a runner. I am an endurance runner. I run distances. My 13, 14 now year old boy can run faster than me. He's a better sprinter than I am. But I run distance well. And I still do speed training. I still go out and run as fast as I can for 2 minutes, have a break and do it again till I've done it 10 times. Why? Why do I do that when in a marathon, I'm never going to be running that fast and I'm not even very good at it. My 14-year-old is already better than me. Because it makes the stuff that you do every day easier. Pushing yourself to the extremes in any skill makes the day-to-day easier. So one of the reasons to practice these things, apart from the fact that with our blessing, take them, Sarah, use them in your DJing, is that it makes the day-to-day easier. You will become a more effortless DJ by learning the hard stuff by rote. You just will. So I hope that helps you, Sarah. But you were on the right wavelength anyway. So in the chat, Jack is saying clunky back in the day meant train wreck. Yes, indeed. The old train wrecks. Kesha says, I always record my mixes, even the clumsy, drunk sounding ones. And so, yeah, more advice there for recording your mixes from the community, Sarah. I hope that helps. So we're going to move on to our final question of today. And this one came in from someone whose name I naughtily forgot to cut and paste, so I'm very sorry. I'm just looking back through my notes, but no, it's not available to me instantly. Anyway, here is your question, anonymous student. Phil, how do you deal with equipment redundancy? In the last iteration of my residency, there was a problem with the venue's smoke machine, and we found a temporary but not quite good enough solution. Should I just start bringing my own stuff so that this doesn't happen, like my own smoke machine, for instance? Or should I just roll with it and accept that things might not often be ideal? I don't mind setting up more stuff, but at the same time, I see the rush of becoming a control freak. Right, you're playing in venues, stuff goes wrong, you own the stuff yourself anyway. Should you just bring it and take over and do it right? And I wrote one thing here in response to this, which is charge money. Charge money. You shouldn't be doing stuff because you want the gig to be perfect when you're not being paid to do that. Your job isn't to provide the equipment, I'm guessing, or else you'd have bought it in the first place. Your job is to turn up and play the music. And I think what is happening here is that you kind of want to do the best job, and that's great, but you don't want to fall into a habit, especially with regular gigs, of being expected to bring stuff because their gear isn't good enough. I think back to my professional DJing days, and it was rare to play a venue where everything was perfect. It just was. I used to go around and listen because I was a real stickler. I loved audio quality. I was really into making sure everything sounded right. And I'd go around the venue at the beginning of the night. If I was DJing there, all night, I'd put the first couple of tunes on. There'd be no one in. I'd go and I'd literally put my ear in every speaker that I could. I'd check that the hi-hats are working, the mid-ranges are working, all the bass drivers are working. You'll be amazed at how many venues have got speakers that are blown, that are out, but no one's fixed it because it hasn't actually sounded too bad yet. I would often have to do the lights myself because the lighting person didn't turn up. I had no idea how to do the lights. I didn't know how to use the lighting desk, but I figured out how to do a few basic things so that I could, with one hand, do the lights and with my other hand, almost do the DJing, right? In other words, over the months and years of DJing regularly in venues that weren't perfect, I kind of learned to work with what they've got and to accept what they hadn't got and accept when things went wrong. But what I realised quite early was that you don't start bringing your own stuff unless there is a financial incentive to do so. Otherwise, it crosses the boundaries of the DJ doing more than they're being paid for. So I would just say, think commercially. And also, you're obviously a perfectionist and that's great, but honestly, I'll whisper this, most people don't care. Most people are not going to leave a venue and say, it was a great night, but the smoke machine wasn't working properly. They're just not. And it's even more fundamental than that. Most people aren't even going to notice if the sound system doesn't sound very good. It's actually a little bit freeing for DJs to realize this because this goes as far as you and what you're doing. People think that every transition, every track that's been chosen that didn't quite hit the mark, everyone in the room is having a horrible time because of that. And the truth is that no one's noticing. It's the overall vibe. It's the overall, if you play 2 tracks that everyone loves in any given night, they're probably going to go home happy. If you save your very best song till last and everyone goes home singing it, they're probably going to go home happy. DJing is far more random, far more rough, and far less reliant on perfection than us DJs, God bless us all, think it is. So I would honestly say 2 things then. Charge money if you're bringing your own gear, and don't worry so much about being perfect because, hey, the venue owner obviously isn't, so why should you, frankly? And also a few good comments coming in. The Ruckus says, you'll also be putting your own gear at risk if you take it. And also you might not be insured, so if anything happens, if your gear gets damaged or even worse, if your gear topples over and injures someone, it's your gear. You shouldn't be doing that. And so that's my advice. Don't be a control freak. Don't go for perfection. So that's where we're going to leave it for today. What a mix of questions we have. We really did get stuck into those 5 big areas of DJing, didn't we? If you've enjoyed this, we'd love a 5-star rating or a nice review on the platform you get your podcasts from. Remember that if you want to learn to DJ with Digital DJ Tips, the world's leading online DJ school, head over to digitaldjtips.com. Even if you don't, then hit that join button and subscribe, where we'll keep you up to date with everything going on in the DJ world in your inbox for free. Meanwhile, this has been Phil in the Digital DJ Tips studio with another episode of the podcast. Until the next one, get good, get out there, and make the moments. Bye-bye for now.